Okay, so today we're gonna dive into the Vintage Malt Whisky Company, which is a Scottish independent bottler.
Yeah, cool.
This is a deep dive for those of you who wanted to learn a bit more about the whiskey industry.
Yeah.
And specifically kind of how independent bottlers,
Yeah.
what their role is and how they play into the wider Scotch whiskey world.
Yeah, it's a really interesting area.
Yeah, and this particular company I think is a pretty fascinating case study.
Definitely.
So we have two main sources for this deep dive.
Okay.
We have an interview with Andrew Crook,
Right.
who now runs the company, founded by his father, Brian.
Okay.
And then we also have a blog post which details their
Okay.
kind of new venture into rum production in Islay.
Interesting. So they're doing both.
Yeah, so we're going to get into all that.
Yeah.
So I guess our kind of mission today is to kind of, first of all, figure out, where did the Vintage Malt Whisky Company come from? And then we're going to look at, what are the challenges and opportunities facing independent bottlers in today's, Scotch world?
Okay.
And then, of course, we have to get to the bottom of this unexpected move into rum.
Yeah. How did that happen?
So to begin with the origins of vintage malt whiskey.
Okay.
Brian Crook, Andrew's father, he actually had some experience in the industry before starting the company.
Right.
He had worked in sales for a couple of well-known distilleries,
Oh, okay.
Auchentoshan and Bowmore.
So big names.
Yeah, so, clearly
He knew his stuff.
he had contacts, he understood how the business worked,
Yeah.
and he started Vintage Malt Whiskey in Glasgow back in 1992.
So he saw a gap in the market.
Yeah, and I think what's really fascinating is how he kind of, used that insider experience to shape his vision for the company.
Yeah.
He saw a shift in the industry,
Wow.
towards these larger corporations,
Right.
and away from kind of, the smaller, more family-run distilleries.
Yeah.
And he really wanted to, I think, hark back to that earlier era
I see.
of offering whiskey in smaller batches.
Right.
And, really focusing on quality and craftsmanship.
I bet those connections he made at Auchentoshan and Bowmore were really valuable when he was getting started.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can't overstate how important those connections are in the whiskey world.
Right. Especially as a smaller company
Exactly.
trying to, source good whiskey and build a reputation. It's all about who you know.
And they pretty quickly released some well-regarded single malts.
Yeah.
Their first marketed single malt was Finlaggan from Islay.
Okay.
And then after that came Tantallon
Right.
and Glenalmond, and of course their Cooper's Choice series, which
Yeah, a lot of people know that one.
has become very popular.
Very popular, yeah.
And I think it's really interesting is that, Brian, he really emphasizes the importance of securing whiskey from what he calls Anerkendte His, which is Danish for reputable distilleries. Oh, interesting.
And, as an independent bottler,
Yeah,
when you're trying to build that trust with your customers
absolutely.
and build a reputation,
Yeah.
it all comes down to, the quality of the whiskey that you're sourcing
Right.
and being able to guarantee that it comes from a reputable source.
Yeah, you need that provenance, and, his long experience in the industry obviously gave him access to those sources.
Exactly.
That's so important.
And from those humble beginnings, they've actually grown
Okay.
a bit.
Yeah.
They now sell to something like 20 markets globally,
Wow.
with Germany and Asia being particularly strong markets.
So a pretty wide reach for a relatively small company.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
there's still,
Yeah.
a family-run operation.
Right.
And as we mentioned, the next generation is now in charge.
Yeah.
Andrew Crook is now running the business, although Brian's still involved.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Keeping it in the family.
So let's talk about, I guess, one of the biggest challenges for independent bottlers.
Which is, how do they actually get the whiskey?
Yeah. How do you even get started with that
Exactly.
when you're competing with these huge companies?
Right, because the big distilleries and the big brands,
Right.
They have their own, production and their own bottling.
Yeah.
And so where does that leave an independent bottler?
Yeah.
And Andrew is pretty upfront in the interview
Okay.
about how this is becoming increasingly difficult.
Yeah.
Securing a reliable supply of whiskey is one of the biggest hurdles that they face.
And I guess that's mainly because of the dominance of those big corporations.
Exactly.
With their, enormous buying power.
Yeah. They can sign these long-term contracts
Exactly.
with distilleries, and they can just, buy up huge amounts of stock.
Right. And for a small independent bottler,
Yeah.
it must be really hard to compete with that.
It is. And,
Yeah.
and you know, Andrew really credits their continued access to whiskey to those relationships that his father built and to the long-term agreements that he put in place,
Okay.
decades ago.
Wow. So that was really forward thinking.
Yeah. I mean, he really, understood that,
He had the foresight.
yeah, that these relationships were going to be crucial
Yeah.
to their survival.
And he describes the industry as having that big family feel.
Yeah, he does, which I thought was...
Even today.
Even today.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and it's sort of, it's a little bit at odds with this idea that,
These big multinational companies are taking over.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But he's saying that, there's still that sense of community.
Right.
And that, personal connections really matter.
I guess if you've been in the industry for a long time,
Yeah.
you get to know people and
You get to know people.
build up that trust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he also, doesn't shy away from the fact that it's getting harder
Okay.
to obtain whiskey from, some of the biggest names in the industry.
Right.
So, we're talking about distilleries like Macallan,
Yeah.
Highland Park.
Big names.
And of course, any of the distilleries owned by Diageo, which is a huge
Massive.
drinks conglomerate.
Yeah.
So, for a small independent bottler trying to get their hands on, casks from those distilleries,
Yeah. It's a challenge.
it's a real challenge.
It must be.
But there's a really interesting kind of angle to this,
Okay.
where Andy suggests that in some ways being relatively small
Right.
might actually be an advantage
How so?
because they're not seen as a direct threat
I see.
by those major players. They're not competing on the same scale.
Yeah. They're kind of flying under the radar a bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they might actually have, an easier time
Okay.
accessing certain stocks.
I see.
Because they're not...
They're not seen as a threat.
Exactly. They're not seen as, trying to muscle in on their territory.
So it's a bit of a balancing act then.
It is. It's a very delicate balancing act.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so I think that, that kind of leads to the question that a lot
Yeah.
of people might have, which is,
Have they thought about making their own whiskey?
exactly.
Yeah.
Have they ever considered setting up their own distillery?
It seems like the next logical step.
It does. And Andrew confirms that they have
Okay.
thought about it a lot.
Right.
And if they were to do it,
Yeah.
he says that Islay would be their preferred location.
Oh, wow. So sticking with the Islay connection.
Yeah, well, they
Yeah.
clearly have a love for the island.
Yeah.
And
It's kind of romantic, isn't it?
it's a very romantic idea.
Having your own distillery on Islay.
Yeah, building your
Yeah.
own distillery and making your own whiskey, right
Yeah.
there on this iconic island.
It sounds idyllic.
But
But
the interview really kind of lays out the harsh financial realities
Yeah.
of that dream.
okay.
They estimate that it would cost around 10 million pounds
Wow. Just to build the distillery.
just to build it.
Just to build it.
Right.
And then on top of that, they would need another 10 to 20 million
Oh my goodness.
in operating costs
Over what period?
over the first 5 years.
So you're talking about, potentially 30 million pounds
Yeah.
before you even see a return.
Before you even see a bottle of whiskey.
That's a huge investment.
It's a massive investment.
Yeah.
And, so they have considered,
Yeah.
alternatives.
Like what?
Producing white spirits, for example,
Right.
vodka or gin.
Okay.
But Andrew points out that, those markets are incredibly crowded.
Right. Everybody's making gin these days.
It's very trendy, right?
Exactly.
And so, the prices are very competitive.
You're not going to make a huge margin.
It's very hard to make a profit.
Yeah.
And then on top of that,
You get the challenge of building a brand.
you've still got the challenge of building a brand
Right.
and establishing yourself in the market,
Yeah. Breaking into that market is tough.
which is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
So, it's not an easy solution.
So what are other people doing?
Well, it's interesting because the interview actually mentions that there's a bit of a trend these days
Oh, really?
of people from the tech world
Okay.
investing in new distilleries.
So they've got the money.
They've got the capital.
Yeah.
And they're, maybe looking for
Passion project.
a passion project or,
Yeah.
a way to diversify their investments.
Right.
So there's definitely, new players emerging.
So even though it's a huge investment,
Yeah.
people are still willing to take the risk.
They are. But
Yeah.
even with that capital, there are other hurdles.
Like what?
One of the things that Andrew mentions is the rising cost of oak casks,
Right. Of course.
which is, essential for aging whiskey.
Absolutely.
And the global demand for casks is so high right now
Yeah, everybody needs them.
that it's becoming both very expensive
Right.
and very difficult to source good quality casks.
Wow. So that's a real problem.
It's a real problem.
Uh,
And I think, all of this really underscores the kind of long-term questions
yeah.
that independent bottlers are facing.
Like,
Andrew makes the point that many independent bottlers might eventually need to establish their own distilleries
just to survive?
just to guarantee
Yeah.
that they have a consistent supply of whiskey.
Right. They can't rely on these other distilleries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, it's really about securing their future
Right.
in a very competitive market.
Good, smart move.
So then we come to the really unexpected part of the story,
What's that?
which is that instead of building a whiskey distillery,
Right.
they've decided to start a rum distillery.
What, on Islay?
On Islay.
That's crazy.
I know, it's so unexpected.
Okay.
But it's actually, when you think about it,
Yeah.
it's kind of a brilliant move.
Okay, why?
Well, first of all, Islay is known for its peated
Right.
and powerful whiskeys.
Yeah, very distinctive.
Yeah, and
Smoky.
smoky.
Yeah.
And so, they're kind of taking advantage of that
Right.
unique environment
They're using it to their advantage.
to create a rum with a very distinct flavor profile.
I see.
And the blog post really kind of gets into, the thinking behind the Islay Rum Company.
Okay, so what's their goal?
Their goal is to craft a rum that is, truly unique
Okay.
and that really benefits from Islay's, specific terroir.
Right, so that harsh maritime climate,
Exactly.
it affects the whiskey.
Yeah.
Why not the rum?
And it just makes sense, when you think about how that climate influences the maturation of whiskey.
Right.
It's logical that it would also impart some of that character to rum.
So they're using that to their advantage.
Exactly.
Wow.
And they're really emphasizing a very traditional and artisanal approach
Okay.
to rum production.
Right.
They're really focused on quality. Good.
They're committed to using local ingredients wherever possible.
Okay.
And they're aging the rum in casks right there on Islay,
Right in that climate.
in that very specific climate.
Mm-hmm.
And the blog post, highlights how that unique combination of temperatures, those
Right.
cooler maritime influences,
Yeah.
alongside kind of more typical maturation temperatures,
Yeah.
can actually lead to a slower
Okay.
and more complex development of flavors in the rum.
Interesting.
So it's kind of like they're
really thinking about this.
really thinking about it, and they're
Yeah.
using their
expertise.
their whiskey knowledge
Yeah.
to inform their rum making.
So what kind of casks are they using?
Well, that's another really fascinating aspect.
Okay.
They're using some exclusive casks,
Uh-huh.
including casks that have previously held whiskey.
Oh, wow. So that's going to impart some really interesting flavor.
We're going to give the rum some really unique,
Yeah.
smoky, and complex notes,
Yeah.
like a fusion of Islay spirit.
Exactly. And rum production is actually a relatively new
Okay.
addition to Islay's distillery landscape.
Right. It's always been whiskey.
It's always been whiskey.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like a new chapter.
So are they aiming this at whiskey drinkers or rum drinkers?
Well, I think their ambition is to create a premium rum
Okay.
that will appeal to both.
Oh, wow. So they're trying to bridge the gap.
Exactly.
That's ambitious.
They want to attract rum enthusiasts,
Yeah.
but they also want to appeal to whiskey drinkers who might be looking for something a bit different,
Right.
but with that same level of quality and complexity.
Okay. I can see that.
And the blog post really, kind of conveys their excitement
Yeah.
about experimenting with different cask types
Yeah.
and different aging methods.
To create these unique rum profiles.
Exactly.
Yeah. That sounds really exciting.
So, this whole venture really kind of demonstrates a spirit of innovation, for a company that's been, so successful in the whiskey world
Yeah.
to branch out into rum.
Yeah.
It shows a real willingness to adapt
Yeah.
and explore new possibilities.
And they're not afraid to experiment.
Exactly.
This is cool.
And the blog post even hints that they might be hoping to take the rum market by storm,
Wow.
in a similar way to
As they did with whiskey.
how they've kind of, made a name for themselves in the whiskey world.
That's a bold statement.
It is.
Yeah.
But, they've clearly got the expertise.
They do.
And the passion.
And the passion. Yeah.
And I think they're definitely onto something.
Yeah. It makes you want to try this Islay rum.
It does. It makes me very curious.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's kind of circle back to their core business.
Okay.
The whiskey bottling.
Right.
And one of the things that they've always really focused on
Right.
is their Cooper's Choice series.
Right.
Which is where they, carefully select and bottle single casks.
From different distilleries.
From various distilleries.
Okay.
And what's really special about this series
Yeah.
is that they often source
Yeah.
pretty rare casks.
Like what?
Including casks from distilleries that are no longer operating.
Wow. So you can't get that whiskey anywhere else?
You can't get it anywhere else.
That's amazing.
And these are very limited releases.
Okay.
Typically only around 300 to 400 bottles per cask.
Wow.
So they're highly sought after.
By collectors.
By collectors, yeah.
Yeah.
And,
That must be hard to find those casks.
it's incredibly difficult to find these unique and rare casks.
Especially as time goes on.
Especially as time goes on.
And more people are looking for them.
Exactly. And again,
Yeah.
Andrew really emphasizes how important those personal relationships are.
That his father built.
That his father built in securing these exceptional casks.
It's still all about who you know.
It really is.
Yeah.
Such a human element
It's fascinating.
to this business.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the future.
Yeah.
Andrew does touch on kind of
Their outlook.
their outlook and, how they see the market evolving.
Yeah. What are they worried about?
And he highlights, China, South America, and India.
Right. Huge markets.
As markets with massive growth potential.
Right.
But, of course, he also recognizes that these are the markets where the big multinationals are also investing heavily.
Of course, they're going to go where the money is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the other challenge is that, in those regions, right now the preference is still very much for blended whiskey.
Over single malt.
Over single malt.
Yeah.
So, that raises a really interesting question.
Which is
what happens if, demand in those markets suddenly shifts towards single malt.
Is there going to be enough whiskey to go around?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Is there going to be enough aged single malt to meet that demand?
Because it takes time to make whiskey.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, that's a question that the whole industry is grappling with.
It must be.
But Andrew's view is that,
Yeah.
blended whiskey
Right.
will probably remain the dominant force in the market.
Interesting.
And he actually points out that the quality and reputation of blended whiskey is also improving.
Okay.
So, it's not just...
It's not the cheap option anymore.
It's not the poor cousin to single malt.
Yeah.
But he does see the increasing number of new distilleries popping up all over the world as perhaps the biggest long-term challenge.
Because they're competition.
Because it means that,
Yeah.
More and more regions are developing their own whiskey industries.
Right.
And potentially competing with Scotch.
That's interesting.
So, their strategy seems to be one of kind of aiming for steady, sustainable growth.
Not growing too fast.
Not trying to grow too quickly.
Yeah.
And that's partly, to kind of help them weather any potential economic downturn.
You gotta be prepared.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there's also this, unpredictable factor of what happens in China.
Right.
Right now, Chinese consumers are very interested in Japanese whiskey.
Okay.
But will that shift?
Yeah. Will they move to Scotch?
Will they start to favor Scotch single malts?
That's a big question.
It's a big question.
Yeah.
And of course, there's always the possibility of further consolidation within the industry.
More mergers and acquisitions.
Exactly. More big companies buying up smaller companies.
That's the way of the world.
And Andrew acknowledges that, their future is very much
tied to these trends.
Shaped by these wider industry trends.
Yeah, it's unpredictable.
It's a very unpredictable environment. So finally, on a bit of a personal note.
Okay.
Andrew does share a couple of his own personal favorites.
Oh, cool.
If he had to choose a whiskey outside of their own range, he says he would go for Cull Islay.
Okay.
Which he praises for its fantastic balance.
I've heard good things about Cull Islay.
Yeah, it's a great whiskey.
Yep.
And then the interviewer asks him, what's the best whiskey you've ever tasted?
Okay, the ultimate question. So what did he say?
His answer is a Lachlan 1964 single grain.
Wow.
And he describes it in a really beautiful way.
What did he say?
He says, "Der sont Angli."
Okay.
which is Danish for where the angels sang, which I
Wow.
just think
That's beautiful.
it's such a
Yeah.
evocative way to describe a whiskey.
It is. Yeah, it really captures the experience.
Yeah.
So I think, as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
the story is the Vintage Malt Whisky Company
Yeah.
really shows us their passion
Yeah.
and the challenges
Yeah.
that independent bottlers face
Absolutely.
in this world of Scotch whiskey.
And how important those personal relationships are,
Yeah, crucial.
for sourcing their stock. Their ongoing kind of deliberations about whether to establish their own distillery.
Right, that's a big decision.
Yeah. And then, of course, this really fascinating and unexpected move into rum production.
On Islay, of all places.
One Islay.
Yeah.
And, for those of you who wanted to gain a kind of quick but thorough understanding
Right?
of this part of the history, I think, we've covered a lot of ground.
Definitely, we've gone deep.
We have.
Yeah.
And this whole journey really highlights
Yeah,
how dynamic the spirits business is.
it is.
It's a constant interplay between tradition and innovation.
Yeah.
And even well-established players
Yeah.
need to be adaptable
Yeah.
and willing to explore new avenues.
Absolutely.
And I think, their venture into Islay Rum is a great example of that.
It is. Yeah, using their whiskey expertise
Yeah,
to create something new.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it'll be really interesting to see how that develops.
Definitely, yeah.
So I guess that kind of leaves us with a final thought
Okay,
for you to consider.
hit us with it.
Given the limited supply
Yeah.
and the ever-increasing demand
Yeah.
for aged single malt Scotch,
Yeah.
could we see more independent bottlers,
Hmm.
diversifying into other spirits?
Interesting.
Or even, looking at
Yeah.
establishing whiskey distilleries
Okay.
in less traditional regions
To secure their future.
to secure their future.
Yeah.
What unexpected collaborations or
Yeah.
spirit innovations
Yeah.
might we see emerging
From the world of whiskey.
from the kind of established world of whiskey?
That's a good question.
It's definitely something to think about.
Food for thought.
Yeah,
Excellent deep dive. I
Alright.
learned a lot.
me too.
Cheers.